Good evening and welcome to the Lifebuoy segment. We had some little technical difficulties with that previous video, so we're going to get into the next segment that we had scheduled, which is with John Littlepage, Christopher George, and Ryan Smith. We're discussing water polo and discussing if we can get onto the world stage in water polo. So thank you for tuning into Chlorine Carlo right here on Trinidad and Tobago Freestyles. Facebook and YouTube Live. We're still waiting on Christopher and Ryan to log in, but I have John Stanley Littlepage holding on in the back. I forget he's not John Stanley anymore. He's just John Littlepage. You dropped the Stanley?
It's still there, but you grow out of some things. You grow out your kidneys.
Good evening, and how have you been? Where in the world are you?
I'm back in Trinidad now, so.
Oh, you're back in
happy
Trinidad.
to be home. Minus the lockdown, but happy to be home.
Minus the lockdown. Which part of the lockdown? The sports lockdown or everything?
The part that closed down pools. I was still being quite active in the pool, and they came down and shut that in. Happy that we could at least run on the road and everything right now and get outside. I have 2 little boys now as well, so walking around the neighborhood is also a big help. So coming from Houston, where they had really no rules around lockdowns, it was a big change coming back to Trinidad.
All right, so I'm going to get on to Chris and Ryan to get them to join on the broadcast, but this is the segment we call the Lifebuoy, Saving Aquatics, one guest at a time. Well, we don't have one guest this time, we have 3, hopefully. So hopefully we could make some headway here in this discussion. And I mean, a lot of times we neglect to talk about water polo, but water polo is a part of the whole aquatics family. So while we're waiting on the others to come in, we question, what is it about water polo? Why water polo for you?
Well, that's a tricky one. I mean, I've been playing water polo since maybe 11 or 12. I used to do it in tandem with swimming. In my last segment, I would mention that I wasn't always the best age group swimmer. And I gravitated towards water polo as I was performing slightly better in that. And then my swimming started to catch up, maybe with the multiple training sessions between swimming and polo, putting in that extra work. I started making my first national teams in water polo. It's a completely different sport in terms of swimming, where you get that camaraderie. You actually have that, that team environment. I mean, when you're rolling in the water and you're sweating with your brothers, essentially, that you're also allowed to talk to them. I mean, in swimming, it's different, where your goggles are on and you're staying at the line for a lot of the time. Yes, you have your banter on the wall and you have your racing going on, but in terms of just fighting and sweating and essentially going to battle with your teammates, and that is something completely different. It's a whole different spectrum of the aquatic sports.
So Ryan Smith, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Possibly.
Okay.
So good evening. Good evening, Ryan. Welcome back to Chlorine Carlo. And for you, why do you love water polo?
Well, I got involved in water polo when I came back from university, actually, and it was very new at the time for those involved. We're getting it back started in Trinidad. It was new to Trinidad, I should say, or revamped. So it was new for this generation. And I just got involved and saw them, struggling. They went through struggles. And I said, I would like to help, because the sport seems like an interesting sport, good teams. And then it's a likable sport. So I just fell in love with it after that.
All right. And how did you...
A little bit of it in secondary school as well.
And how did you move from just loving the sport to being an administrator?
Well, there's the need. Most of the people involved just wanted to play. So I decided, by the way, good evening, John. I don't think I greeted you. I hope all is well. So I noticed the need. Everybody wanted to play. They all wanted to play water polo. Nobody wanted to focus on, developing and taking it forward. So back in like let's see, it was around 2000, I would say. We go, we want to go to CISE. It was at the point in time, and we say, okay, well, ASAT, we would like to represent the country in water polo, have a team, but it was really only swimming in ASAT at that point in time, and um, we got a lot of stick, as they would say,
Mm.
to go. Why should we send a team? What training have you done? A lot of questions, valid questions. Um, there was just one club basically training at the time, or one set of people training at the time, and they went to represent Trinidad and Tobago in, well, before I came on board, it was in 1998, but in 2000 we went to Aruba. So I got involved like that, and then I said, when we came back from that tournament, I said, well, we shouldn't have to go through this every 2 years, because the feedback that I was getting was that every time we have to go to represent the country, it's always, a difficulty, and say, why should we send a team? And I decided that we had to change things so that ASAT would want to send a team, not just us wanting to go and represent the country and get the sport going, but ASAT would actually want a team to represent the country. So we started having competitions that we didn't have before. We introduced it into the secondary schools, um, and and we took it from there. And we had little five-a-side competitions and so on, so that people saw that things were happening in water polo. It wasn't just the CISE every 2 years that we say, okay, let's come together and put together a team for that. Show them that we are doing something, we're in training and we're competing, so that we can, get better in this sport.
And John, as you went along your career in water polo, because I know when we spoke last time, you used to go with your father to Blue Dolphin Swim Club and rough it up with the older guys. How have you felt like going to the age group? That was there more opportunities presented to water polo than it used to have in the past
Yeah,
at
so
the age
as
group
John
level?
said, I started close to that beginning. I mean, my first national team was 2002, so this would have been, I guess, the third CISC after ASAT was sanctioned a national team to go. But I was probably in that Godolphin school from around that 2000s, 1999. And I mean, definitely now throughout, I mean, I was still up part of the national team up to 2017. You saw, I mean, vast improvements. I mean, it was beg and, okay, can we get sanctioned for this? To okay, you have a bunch of people coming out, you have different clubs, and you're actually trying to compete for a spot on these national teams. And I mean, we also went from whipping boys in these tournaments to winning a lot of these Caribbean regional tournaments. So we saw vast improvements, and I would attribute a lot of it to a lot of the work that Ryan's done. I mean, I was part of the first secondary schools game. So when those started, I was probably in Form 3 or Form 4, and I mean it was competition, and it's something that we lacked in Trinidad. We used to have these inter island where, okay, yes, we go to Barbados, we used to go to Curacao, they would come to Trinidad, and a lot of that has actually gone away. So I think we had a peak, and during the same in my lifespan of Trinidad water polo, it's also experienced a semi-regional decline as well, which is a challenge that I hope we could overcome and continue to grow.
And then I know one of the senior team, it was a senior team that went to the FINA Youth Development Trophy competition. Right. You were a part of that team as well, John, correct?
Yes, yes. I was part of the first one in Kuwait when we won bronze. And then unfortunately, I skipped the follow up in Saudi Arabia due to schooling commitments.
So let me ask you the question now, John. And you could do it simple yes or no, I don't know. Can Trinidad and Tobago compete on the world stage in water polo?
And I think it's a loaded question. I think absolutely we can, in terms of we have the talent out there, and we have individual athletes that have represented. We had players playing in professional leagues in Holland. We have people that won accolades in the collegiate circuits at the top schools. But do I think we're going to get there on this current trajectory? No, I think that it's far fetched. I think we do require a lot of investment. It is going to require.
But John, let me don't go into what we need yet. We will get there. We'll get there. Because I know
Yes.
you might have a list.
Yeah,
And
I
Ryan,
would say yes, we have the talent, but on the current trajectory, it's world class stage. I don't see it right now.
Ryan, same question.
Yes, I agree with John totally. And yes, my list will probably be longer than John's own. So, yes, we do have the talent here. It's not an easy path to get to Olympics, particularly for the men. The women may have a little bit easier um, path to get to Olympics. However, is a lot that needs to be done, including the mindset of a lot of the athletes as well. Some of the athletes don't believe, some of the better athletes don't believe that we will ever get there, that we can get there. So it's a mindset. Some of the athletes don't feel that we will ever get the support to get there as well. So
So
so it's a kind of yes and no at the same time.
before we get to the support, let me just, I'm being practical. Let's just do the numbers game. I
Mhm.
mean, I was going to say Trinidad is this little dot with very limited amount of people even playing water polo. And you go to these bigger world-class countries, bigger countries that have this wide pool of talent. Even with the talent that we have now, you believe, and I'm not even talking really Olympics per se, but competing at CAC and Panama and medaling at those games, with the current crop of people we have available, do you think we could get there?
We could definitely get there. CAC games easier. We've qualified for Pan Am games, as you know. So we're right there in CAC games. We do um, need a little more push to get to the medal situation. In terms of Pan Am games, yes, in order to get to the World Championships, to the Olympics, you need to medal at Pan Am games at the very least to be able to get there as well.
Yeah. And you need to go.
Yes, we need to go.
Yeah, because sorry, I haven't gotten Crystal log back on because I know to log on because I know that was part of his reason for changing his trajectory because he had mentioned in his interview last year that Pan Am for him at least it was like a step to the Olympics and he felt that there was a team of persons that could have, I mean, they qualified and for whatever reason they weren't allowed to progress. So how what a but I didn't know where to start now. John, you were part of that Pan Am team to that qualified? Or
Yeah,
that
so
and how
I
was
would
that
say
how was that
I'd go,
experience for you?
I'd go back to that previous comment you had, right? So if we would compete at the CAC level, so following that Kuwait trip where we won bronze, that the majority of that team went to the following CAC games, and that's the competition where we qualified for Pan Am. I
Right.
would say we were, I mean, that's the most competitive we've been at the Central American level. I can't recall the year right now. I guess that was around 2005, around there. Um, but I mean, that's when we had foreign coaches, we had programs, we had inter-league competitions in the country. There's a lot of stuff around, and we were really firing in all cylinders at that point in time. To get there now again, I would say a big difference is how much competitions we play a year. And as part of the senior team, since I left school, we would probably play 2 tournaments every 4 years. You'd play CCCAN to qualify for CAC, and then you play CAC, and then you have a 2-year break, and then you go back to CCCAN. And that has been the story of senior water polo in Trinidad over the last number of years. And I mean, when I was on the collegiate circuit, or even when I just returned from Houston, I was playing 4 games every other weekend for a 4-month period or 5-month period. So it's just that level of games. And you had seen all these competitions, even the last ones where we weren't as competitive. By the end of the tournament, we would be faced up with the teams that win, and you're being competitive with that team. It's just shaking off that dust and getting those first couple of games out of the way. We are kind of starting off where we're now getting game ready, and it's all about match fitness, and that is what we're lacking greatly in terms of being competitive.
Ryan, I know, and I can't even remember if I introduced Ryan as the manager of the TNT Senior Water Polo Team. and he's also the manager of Royal Seals. So, Ryan, in your opinion, what are you can start with one thing. I'll throw it in your court first. Tell me one thing that you all need going forward to um, get what get the senior team to the world stage?
There's one thing: funding.
Uh,
If you say one thing, it's funding, because
right,
if with the funding we can get the competition that John spoke about, so that we
right.
can get that level of competition that is so needed for athletes to be ready to compete at the lower levels, to be able to get us to qualify for the higher levels. If we don't have the funding, and the funding starts very basic and then goes right up, because the funding starts with just being able to train properly, all right, being able to have physios, doctors, and so on. We have absolutely none of that right now. All right, so it's a total lack of funding that we are expecting our athletes to try to somehow pull through without that.
And John, let me be a little devil's advocate. Do you all deserve? Do senior water polo people deserve the funding? I've heard in the past that sometimes the seniors are not as committed as the juniors, right? Is that true? Is it that you all train together as you should, or is that you all are not motivated to train? What is it?
I think it's a chicken and egg, right? So you're talking about, are you motivated to train? And picture a team being together. I mean, go back to where Chris actually left the team in terms of you qualify for tournaments and then things are taken away. You get disbanded. So you were training for something and then all of a sudden there's no more target to achieve. And then you know that the next competition is 2 years out. To say, okay, I'm now going to sacrifice mornings and afternoons for the next 2 years for something 2 years out for a qualifying competition. I mean, it's tough. And I mean, you're talking about the senior team being competitive, right? So yes, we're the Amateur Swimming Association of Trinidad and Tobago, but you need to kind of stop treating it as an amateur level if you're trying to compete at these elite levels, right? It's almost, you need to treat it as a professional sport and something that you're trying to target. In terms of, do we deserve funding right now? I mean, right now, I think we're at a level where we kind of actually need to rebuild the sport. I mean, especially COVID, there was a couple of initiatives that took off with Marlins that opened up to ex-national players and the better crops of the younger club teams, and they were scrimmaging. So people were getting back in the water, and you actually saw a resurgence of the older guys coming back out. Just those kind of things of a place to train and those fun games to kind of get people back interested. And in the end, when we were most productive in water polo, and I would say the youth team qualifying for world championships as well, it is when our senior team is at the highest level. So it kind of cascades down. You have a good senior team. It's competition for the junior team. They get better. It doesn't really benefit the senior team because, again, you're playing down a level while the juniors are playing up. So if you really want your senior team to grow, you need to get them exposure and these constant games. But right now, I would agree with you right now. Funding right now, you'd have to make a hard case and you build a plan around it. And I'm not expecting $1 million to come through. It'll start with small funding. You start working your way up. It gains momentum and you keep building. But obviously, all sports are fighting for funding right now. The country itself is in a cash crunch. That's part of the reason why I say, do I expect us to be competitive? And it's a far fetched.
Ryan, how difficult a job is it for you to manage a senior water polo team? To get that with these different challenges you have to get the level of commitment from these are not the young teenagers that you had before. These are adults with responsibilities, etc. How difficult is it?
Yeah, well, as John said, it really is a chicken and egg, all right? Because you don't feel motivated if you don't have the funding, and then you don't get the funding if you don't have, if you don't have a team. But in terms of difficulty, Jason, understand this. The junior athletes are the ones who tend to get the funding, all right? Because it's easy. They are going to school. That's all their commitment is, going to school, and they come and train in the afternoon. They're having a good time. Senior athletes have a lot more to deal with. They have work, sometimes family, sometimes they're now getting married, they have a child on the way. So it's a lot of different things, and they don't, sometimes, most of the times, they don't have the support of their parents like they would have when they were teenagers. So you make a national team and your parent may fund it. If you don't get government funding, then the parent will fund it. All right. Well, most parents. At the senior level, that's not really happening because, all right, well, you're an adult now, you have to find your money on your own. Sometimes you don't even get time off from your job, all right, depending on where you're working to be able to represent the country. You might have to leave your job a little bit and take no pay, so they really have it tough. So getting the commitment of national players is really tough. And even with the training times, availability of pool time for training, also tough because they have, some of them are working, some in university, some are working, and when they're working, they finish their job at a certain time. So the only time that they can get to training is after work time. So that also poses a challenge. We have the facilities in Cuba, all right, but if you're working in Port of Spain, on a regular day, getting down to Cuba will probably take you too much time to be able to get down at a decent hour. So now you have to train later at night, which we've been doing, but it really isn't motivating the scenario of everything that goes on as a senior water polo player.
So, I mean, you spoke about the funding and you spoke about the things that you'll need, right? So this is Ryan and John talking, but Ryan, you have sat on like the water polo committees, etc. So it seems like you want the senior polo, sorry, to go forward. Is there a national plan or national vision for water polo at the level of the water polo committee?
Well, the only national vision that you get for water polo, senior water polo, will be from the manager. So, yes, the manager has a plan, but that's as it goes to the water polo committee. But it's almost as if, okay, well, the manager is responsible for executing that. Remember, ASAT is shared with other disciplines. All right. So water polo may not always be the focus. All right, and more.
But I'm talking specific, not even council. I'm talking specifically the water polo committee.
Yeah.
Is it that the focus is only age group? Is it that, I mean, you try to get the senior going? What is the is
Well, in terms of that water polo committee, I would say how it operates is generally on an as need basis. Basically, that is what has been happening. That would be my description of it, of an as needed basis. So you have a competition coming up. This is what we have to prepare for that competition. And a lot of times, no meetings take place because there's nothing coming up. So, for example, during this COVID-19 time, when a lot of planning could have been done, we have had one meeting, all right, just to get an update of if everybody's okay and stuff like that. And that is basically it. Oh, we did have an opportunity to represent at the World Championships, Junior World Championships, for the 20 and under, right? So we got a spot. I guess some of the countries pulled out. We didn't qualify originally, but because there were some vacancies, we got that spot, and that's why that water polo committee meeting was called. All right, but other than that, we've had no water polo committee meetings since the pandemic started. And I would have thought, this is a perfect time, that we can do planning. I've suggested it. We have some planning and we could do some restructuring to make sure we understand where we want to go, how we're going to do it, what things we can do differently so that we can do better when this whole pandemic is finished, so that we don't do the same thing and get nowhere.
So if you're now tuning in, this is the Lifebuoy segment, saving aquatics one guest at a time. And today we're talking water polo. John, Ashley Alonso hailing you out here on the chat. So You can tell her hi back. You can tell her hi back if you want, but you don't have to. John, you're an adult now, so well, you're adult a while now. But hearing what Ryan has said, and now you are a senior athlete. How you feel about hearing that there hasn't been much discussion about water polo during this time? Do you think we could get to? Do you think we could get to the world stage?
I mean, my honest opinion, it's not surprising. I mean, it's the same battles we've been facing over the past couple of decades. So, can we get it? Yes, but again, like I said, it is difficult. It's a struggle for funding, and you are competing with. I mean, ASAT is competing with the rest of the sporting fraternities, and then within ASAT, you're now also trying to divert funds between water polo and swimming. Um, and I mean, again, I go back to that amateur in front of it. A lot of the people that serve on these committees are swimmers' parents, right? So it's volunteer positions, and you look at it again. It's now leaning towards again the age groups versus as a senior team because okay, my children on this, I'm trying to fight to get as much funding and this development in there as well. One thing I do want to say is, and touching on and where do we go age group versus senior, and I think where we reach in Trinidad right now, I think there is a gap between where we were at our peak and now there's a gap in the senior team. It's almost you now need to rebuild again from the junior. I mean, my first water polo team was senior team was at 15 at CAC games. They had rules kind of incorporated after that where you have to be a certain age to represent a senior team. And you look at that rule and then you just look at okay a Messi or a Neymar and what age they represent a Brazil in a senior World Cup. And I mean they give you excuses about it's about protecting the younger talent, but to me I mean a lot of us grew up in that time, and it's probably the stalwarts in the sport. I mean, Chris, myself, Chris's brother. I mean, it's a couple of 34-year-olds who are still representing Trinidad at the senior level, a gap, and then some 25-year-olds. So I think again, you bring that in, you get these younger people. They get as much competition. They get more. They can do the age group competitions. They get to do the senior competitions. So you have multiple competitions a year now. You can start getting that in, and you get them to develop the sport. I remember coming back from university. It was always calling, okay, guys, let's come back together and train for something. We need more of those again to really drive the sport and grow the interest.
But I think one of the things, and either we all could take this one of the things too that is a pet peeve of mine is that water polo is still a West sport. It's still a West-based sport, as in you don't have, that's a very limited talent pool. With, sometimes I like to say, what can we do without the government or without the association? For persons who love water polo, what can be done? Because I mean, there are facilities all over. I mean, I run a facility, and Ryan and I have talked, and full time is an issue, but COVID may provide opportunity. You never know. But has there been like a drive to increase the base so coming to Cuba mightn't seem so far because it might be midpoint for everybody?
Well, we actually have done that. We've done clinics in Tobago, in Point Fortin, in San Fernando. We've done it, but unless there's follow up, and you put someone in there, a lot of people in the country don't know about water polo. So if it is that we have people who are only living in the West that are interested in coaching, all right, they're not gonna go into traffic to go to coach down in San Fernando.
You're not going to pass the lighthouse.
Well, that too, but some will, because we have people living, on the East-West corridor who already living past the lighthouse, right? So we do look at getting in some of the programs, but when we have that, even though we have the coaches, as you said, pool time not available. So that is one of the challenges that we have. Now, community pools has always been a discussion where we could try to get in there. It's not ideal, but it's a possibility. But again, that itself has a lot of challenges with it in terms of actually being able to get in there. right? To get it consistently. Sometimes down, and you have to scrap your program and then try to restart again. So there's a lot of challenges as we try to spread the water polo in the throughout the country.
So is it that too we have to get, and anyone could think, is it that we now have to probably get direct buy-in from the Ministry of Sport or the sport company, private individuals probably making proposals, etc., to see if we, I mean, I know sometimes going at the community pool is a risk based on what you said too, with pool being up, pool being down, things like that. Is that somebody has to make a direct intervention to get access there?
Well, Jason,
I don't like
what
I
can
don't
I
like
say?
I don't like to leave here just talking. I like to get some kind of solution, some kind of idea, because right now, I know how it
My
feels.
well, yes. It starts from within. What can I say? It starts from within because had water polo been a separate organization from the Amateur Swimming Association, a lot more would have taken place. Let's let's put it that way. So John could answer the rest of the question and give his point if. But I will leave it at that.
No, I would actually say I try to stay away from the politics of the sport. I got involved at one point in fighting for a team, and that actually led to a temporary resignation before joining. But I mean, dealing with some of these and fighting for the case of water polo over swimming, I mean, you do face a lot of resistance. Um, in terms of growing it, yes, it'll be great to grow, but again, with this history being primarily of West sport, the people that are here and the past players still do live in the West. And I mean, a lot of them have gone back to the pool and they have kind of taken up these coaching mantles in the two clubs that are operating right now, Royal and Marlins. I mean, you do see the numbers in these clubs grow, but again, it would be nice to see something happening at a central and a south level and even the schools league. I mean, I think from when it started to where it is now, there haven't been much new schools added to the. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan. I haven't been around the schools league in a while, but it hasn't had much growth beyond the, I guess the prestige schools in the West. I think the Form One division had a couple of extra ones, but then like doesn't migrate to big school, big pool water polo.
Yeah. What we also had was the introduction back in 2005 of the primary schools league, and they do mini polo. So at least people got an introduction before they went into secondary school of what this sport is about. So they went into secondary school, and some of them were able to make the changeover, um, and do the water polo. However, a lot of these schools, even though you may have more schools in primary school competing, I mean, primary school has also fluctuated in terms of the numbers. It's gone up, it's gone down. We have more schools generally that would have participated in primary schools league, but you also find that when they get into secondary school, because their school does not do the sport, that's it for them. So you may have a few of them might join a club, but in terms of the secondary schools, they don't. Their school doesn't take part. They try to encourage them, and sometimes you may get a one school might come on for a year or a few years, and then they may drop back out.
And then, I mean, normally, I know normally in the school system, you have to have a teacher that is pushing it, right? That's
Correct.
a big thing. You must have a teacher. But
Yeah.
I mean, it goes to a more national problem because, I mean, we like to complain when our athletes don't perform, but there are a lot of systems that are not in place. I mean, in schools, I mean, for example, with swimming, it's in schools, some schools don't swim, or some schools aren't allowed to swim, some schools swim. There
Yes.
isn't like a structured program, even for the swimming part of it. And to get the commitment from some of the schools, I know it is a challenge, but I mean, it requires a whole culture change, I believe. But I believe too, if collectively as an association we all sing in the same tune, but plenty times we have a tune playing and everybody playing in different timing, right? And it's not like I don't feel like there's a national vision for swimming or water polo, to be quite honest.
I feel the same.
So what does it require? Is it that we need a whole revamp? I mean, I know we spoke about revamping the constitution of ASAT? Is it that the swimming association needs to be totally revamped? Is it that we have to sit down and talk more, have more structured discussion? Is it a leadership? What is it?
I think it starts with, well, leadership, of course. You start with the proper leadership and restructuring. I think restructuring is critical to aquatics on the whole, for it to survive going forward. We've seen that even in swimming, Jason, you've seen where we performed better in years gone by, and that has declined. We may have one swimmer now and then, doing something good, but overall aquatics has had a decline, and we need to do a restructure, and it takes dialogue to do that, so that people put their heads together and see how we can restructure to be able to better manage all the aquatic disciplines. All right, and we, of course, we have some aquatic disciplines that we didn't even touch on as yet. All right, like diving and artistic swimming.
But my thing is, if we can't get the ones we have already, we're going to add on two additional.
But if we have the correct structure in place, then it makes it easy for the others to be added on. If we have the correct structure. If we don't have the correct structure, it will always be challenging for them.
John, you have anything to add to that? Or?
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I mean, I've seen swimming, and I mean, when I follow it, I look at the times, and I look at compared to the times that we were doing back when we were competitive swimmers, and it's largely unchanged, and it feels like we are getting left behind by the rest of the world. So it's almost like, okay, what we were doing back then is the same thing we're doing now. And where does that change happen? I mean, in terms of water polo, if I was to make a recommendation, I do think it needs to focus on the juniors. I mean, this is unfavorable as a senior polo player, and I mean, perhaps I know you put me as a retired water polo player, but I mean, I think there's still some stuff left, and I do still enjoy playing the game.
Retired, I put retired T&T water polo, not water polo player. There's a big difference.
I do think the focus comes at the youth, and that is where we could build for the future, essentially. I mean, pumping funds into the senior team, which has been dormant for a long time, is probably not the best use. So you do focus, and you hope you could take a junior team from the 11 to 12 level all the way up to senior, and then that allows you cascading all the way back down. So as they progress, they also get in there. The juniors below them, they're building them up, and you now build your sport.
So basically you're telling me the senior team lost?
No, it needs funding throughout, right? Because you can't expect, okay, so junior players coming up, they are getting funded, and your expectation is that they will continue in the sport. However, when they see at the senior level nothing is happening,
the motivation,
they say, okay, time for me to exit. That's what has happened quite often.
It's a question: do you want to be competitive at the Caribbean level, or do you want to be competitive at the world stage? So yes, you could keep funding equally across the board, and we could probably always remain competitive in the Caribbean. But I think that's a Caribbean water polo problem, and it's not what the rest of the world is doing.
I can't be satisfied with being the best age group team in the Caribbean. You know, if he's the best, he's the best. You understand? And I mean, so a lot of times, I mean, on the swimming side of it, you know, see, it's a similar dilemma. I mean, it's just not this amount of people, because our water polo team is a lot more people, right? But this, you find after the age group swimming, there's a little window where, okay, so how am I going to get to the Olympics if I don't have that kind of support? And to me, this thing requires a whole culture change.
Yes.
Which
I think right now, swimming and water polo at the same end of life. I mean, you either go to university and you continue, or it ends when you finish secondary school. And especially in water polo, it's very difficult for those people. We had a couple of people that went through UE, and I mean, kudos to them to stick in with the sport. But I mean, if I didn't have those consistent games throughout my college career, it would be very difficult to stay in the sport, because you know that, okay, I'm training for this, and I have the opportunity to showcase my talent once every 4 years or once every 2 years.
I'll ask a question. Can we use learn to swim system or implement some kind of a better learn to swim system to get more persons in swimming and water polo? Anybody?
I
I think
definitely,
yes, and I think it's beneficial. I think that's what helped me in swimming. And I mean, if it wasn't for water polo, I don't know if I would ever have become the swimmer that I became. I would have most likely lost interest.
No, no.
And
What I'm asking, the learn to swim level, as in the beginning stage, learning to swim. So what I'm asking is expanding. Can expanding persons who are learning to swim help with water polo?
definitely, because you want to make sure that you have, because you want to make sure you have basics. And I've heard on this program so many times people talk about, the basics that any athlete needs to have from a very young age. All right. And those skills need to be developed. So whether when you go into learn to swim, whether you're going into swimming afterwards, artistic swimming, diving, water polo, those basic skills should be there so that you could, and you have enough of those so that you have enough feed for those programs. So definitely expanding the learn to swim will definitely help for all the aquatic disciplines. However, they need to know about the aquatic disciplines, and too often everybody in learn to swim it just knows, okay, competitive swimming. No, I don't want to do that. Some want to do it, some don't, and then that's it. They don't realize that there are other avenues that you could pursue in terms of aquatics.
So how can okay? I mean, Ryan, you run a club, right? So how can we fix that? Is it that we have to get out to different, if we want to grow the sport, and I mean, a lot of us do it part time, some people do it full time. Is it that we too have to up our marketing game and liaise with these learn to swim persons and say, hey, here what? I mean, we want water polo to build. We want our club. If we had to be selfish, we want our club to build, right? Can we work out some kind of synergy, some kind of partnerships to get a flow from the learn to swim straight up to the water, straight to water polo?
Correct. Yes. So that is definitely something that can be done. So we have partnerships with Learn to Swim programs. All right. And I know there are some Learn to Swim programs that actually encourage children to go into swimming or water polo. All right. But yeah, so definitely we need to do that, and definitely marketing will always be helpful, because the more people know about water polo in the country, is the more likely they will be asking about it. Unfortunately, where we have areas where there's no water polo outside the West, all right, you may have people who will say, okay, well, no, I can't go there, and there's nothing available to me there. So then they start looking at other options. And that's the reality of it as it is right now. So that also needs to change.
How can we incentivize for West people to come up in the East? You need a passport or something?
Just give us full time.
So you're saying once you get full time, you're gonna make it happen.
Jason,
That's
I already have a coach for your pool.
yeah, you like don't talk private business. Yeah.
People who are willing to come and coach at your pool. All right. But
Well, if we can get the pools open in the first place.
right. So if we don't have the pool time there to be able to sustain a program, then we can't do anything. All right. But if we do have it, we have people who come from east and central. They come all the way to Port of Spain for water polo. All right. And they're willing to start programs in those pools once it's available. Once they get pool time available.
and let's be honest, Jason. I mean, I don't think swimming is for everyone. There's going through your, I mean, as a coach and you see age group, you know the people that are interested, the people that are there just because their parents are making them do a sport or keeping them occupied. They prefer to be somewhere else, and sometimes water polo is that option. And I know many people who, I mean, started off as swimming, disinterested, went to water polo, loved it, and stayed in a sport for a lot longer. I mean, in the end, looking at this being primarily age group sports right now, I mean, even if you're not building professional teams, I mean, you're building professional people, and you actually are making better individuals out of the youth. I mean, between the swimming and the water polo, keeping them occupied and just harboring these disciplines and giving in these life lessons being in a competitive sport.
Somebody asked, I seen somebody in the chat here asking for a priority bus route pass so that they could come up. I mean, I don't think we reached. I don't think we reached there in sports. But and somebody mentioned money because it have to be worth their while. I mean, at the end of the day, unfortunately, a lot of persons are volunteers in the sports. I mean, let's be real. I'm sure there are some parents who sometimes don't even want to pay the fees and pay them on time. And comparatively, to other regions, I mean, I'm sure the fees are cheap.
Yes.
So we have a next problem because, I mean, if somebody have to come from town to come up in the east, I mean, they have to have a love for it first before we have to get to that point of paying the amount that the coaches are worth.
Yeah, well, there are definitely a lot of people in water polo that love water polo. Most water polo players love water polo. You see, like this time when they can't train, they are like, yeah, it's real pressure for them because they love water polo so much. They just want to be in the water because it's a fun sport, all right, that they can excel at. But that priority bus route comment, interestingly enough, just this morning, I was talking about if the country wants to get serious about sport tourism, all right, we have facilities, but getting to the facilities is a challenge. So they need to look at alternate methods of being able to get to those facilities. For example, let's look at the Couva facilities that we have, the cycling velodrome, the National Aquatic Center, for example. If you want to get there, if you're living in certain parts of the country, you're going to take forever to get there, right? So maybe we need to look at a system that gets you through the traffic easier, all right? Whether it is a transportation system for the athletes where they have maybe perhaps we put a bus lane, all right? This was the recommendation I got this morning in a conversation with someone. So you have, like Colombia has a bus lane. So you go on a bus, so you have an athlete's bus that take you through that bus lane and everybody, normal traffic continues in the other lanes and you have a bus lane where only buses will be allowed in that lane, so they don't have the traffic that the others. And then you have, of course, fines if you break the law and so on.
Ryan, I had to take a drink there, because you reached year 2050 or something.
But we have to think ahead, all right? If we had a train system, that would have been an easier solution. But of course, that's even beyond 2050, right? So yeah, so that kind of conversation, it's just incidental that comment was put there, and I had that same type of conversation this morning. That these are the things that keep our country back from excelling more at sports.
See, we at the point where we're going to start to wrap up the interview. So I have a question. I don't know if this is for me, but do local swim coaches give enough credence to other aquatic disciplines that are not strictly swimming? Ryan?
You better answer that.
I'm not a coach. I can't. I would say this. Sometimes in the past, when you go to meetings, I'll be honest, sometimes when water polo come up, it's like, oh, that's the team, okay, good, let them go. Or, why are you wasting your time on water polo? That's a waste of time, Right. So, it in my opinion, we have to have a totally different culture of aquatics, right? In-house. Because we can't, let me be real. If we can't fix ourselves here, we can't expect persons to want to invest in us. Unfortunately, I'll say that this sport is highly tied to politics, which probably shouldn't be, right? But if we can't fix ourselves and fix certain structures, how are we going to go forward? I know we had a technical director that came here, stayed for 2 years, and went. I don't know the exact reasons why. What?
It goes back again, and it can get a little political, but it goes back again to the structure. If we have the proper structure in place. So we have right now in ASAT council members that are swim coaches, all right? Council should focus on the structure of the business of the association.
Right.
whereas coaches should be part of the technical committees for swimming, water polo, artistic swimming, and so on. And that's where those kind of technical issues are vented out and then brought to the council that focuses on the vision. Is it in fulfillment of the vision of the association? And that's where it starts. It comes to the structure. So I shouldn't have a water polo proposal going for swimming coaches to decide what should happen. And that is part of the problem. That's a big part of the problem. So it starts with structure. If the structure is not there, then like a house. If you build a house with no structure, what will happen? Will go down the river when heavy rains come.
So, John, I want to ask you a question, and maybe the final question. What can, I mean, you all are not age groupers anymore, right? You all are adults. What can senior players, both past and present, do to help address some of these situations?
Yeah. And I think a lot of senior players still would like to play. I mean, coming from the US circuit, Masters Water Polo is a big part of a lot of the communities. I mean, I was in Houston, and each city in Texas has their own team, and they have all these competitions. I touched on it earlier. I mean, Marlins had kicked off a ex-national players to come play on a Tuesday, Thursday, and some of the better age group people. I mean, if Royal also had a same thing where different days of the week, and essentially now have full weeks there of one, senior players getting back in the water. They're also integrating with the junior players. The junior players are now playing against bigger, stronger competition. I mean, yes, they may not be as fast as they used to be, but I mean, size in water polo is still a very important factor. I mean, you could slow down an age group if you know what to do. You're teaching them new tricks. In that, you're developing them. So one, your club is developing. You're getting better players. The senior players have a place to play, and at the same time, perhaps you keep a senior team. It may not be an elite senior team at this point, but you're keeping a senior team active. And as these age groupers come on, I mean, these senior players will eventually not be able to make a team anymore because the crop of players is that good. You're improving the entire crop across the country or the West, and hopefully in several years out, you have a very competitive team to compete regionally and globally. So it's a place for people to play. There's a lot of people who want to play, and again, the clubs are age group clubs, large by and large. I mean, as a senior player, I'm not going to go and join one of the age group teams because I might be a 35-year-old surrounded by a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds, and I mean that's might not be, I mean, the best thing. I mean, it's not a joy for me. I want to play with people my age and people I played with, and you reminisce on the times, and you have a core of people doing that, and then you have junior players in Waysboy. I wish we could live up to those kind of hypes, and then they create their own dreams, and then going out in future, I mean, they do the same thing that we're doing now.
I don't want them to do the same thing we're doing now, because we're talking and crying here. I don't want them to do that.
Well, if I may, and again, it goes back to the West mentality. Yeah, we have a lot of people that would like to come and play. We have the aquatic center, National Aquatic Center, available to us more than we have other pools available to us, and that can happen there. However, the West mentality for a lot of people, it is that okay, that's too far to go to, go and chill out and thing on a regular basis, and come and do what John is suggesting.
Ryan, final question to you.
Mm-hmm.
What next?
What next? Wait till COVID is finished. All right, but our national players, our senior players, I should say, it's not a national team players, but players who train with the intention of going on a national team. Right. They have been training. They're still training during this time because they're allowed. So to some extent, but we only allowed 5 people at the aquatic center at any point in time for training. So So we're there doing that, waiting for the pandemic and our competitions to come up. Next competition is our CCCAN Championships, which is going to be next year, which is the qualifier for CAC Games, which will be in 2023. All right, so we have 2022 CCCAN is the qualifier for CAC Games in 2023. So basically, that is what next. We want to start having where we have senior teams, and I did it as with my club. We've had for the first time a senior team go overseas and compete over the last 2 years. One competition in Barbados and one in South Florida. All right, so we're trying to encourage those senior players to keep in competition. All right, and not just national team competition, but also club competition. So I think if both clubs could do that, that will also be helpful. All right, to get the senior, to keep the senior interest going.
No, so I still mean what next? Because
What next? What next? We prepare for CCCAN. That is what is next right now. You mean in
so
terms
no,
of
as
overall?
in, what means how can we collectively alleviate some of these problems? That's what I meant for the what next.
Yeah, we have to instill organizational change from us at level go down. I think
And in,
that's where it has to be.
and in the meantime, fix what is within our control, within
What
our
is
organization.
exactly what we're able to do. We keep pushing to try to get more development at the primary school and secondary school level. We try to spread the sport throughout the country, which through the primary school is actually the probably going to be the easiest way to get it known in the country. So we need to look at that angle and develop from there. Because people like competition. They don't just want to know they're training for nothing. So if they have a primary school league, get it into the primary schools throughout the country, and get them involved in having those competitions and knowing about the sport.
So I'd like to thank John Littlepage and Ryan Smith. Well, let me go and look for the only water polo jersey I have, right?
Uganda Cup,
Yeah,
yes,
the only one I have.
2017.
But
That was,
thank you, and Ryan, I
I think
want
that
to
was
say,
John's last competition.
pardon?
I think that was John's last national team. Was it?
I actually didn't do Uganda Cup. I
Oh,
did
you didn't know.
the
CCCAN. Right.
CCCAN in Trinidad. So I
Right.
ended on a home tournament.
Oh, okay, right. Nice.
So I'd like to thank John Littlepage for his time this evening, and Ryan Smith. And Ryan Smith too also, thank you for your contribution to water polo. I know you keep at it and you keep at it and you keep at it regardless, but what I have to say is keep on keeping at it. Keep up the resilience.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks for having this program. At least we get an opportunity to get out there.
Yeah, so later on we'll post it up on the pages, and we also have a little interview, that a pre-recorded interview to play, but we'll post it up on our Facebook pages. We'll share it with you all too, so you can share it within the community. All right. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, John. Thank you for all the persons who tuned in for this water polo discussion on Chlorine Callaloo, and see you again next week. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Jason.
Good night.